Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I'm your host, Jim Gramm. Alongside me is the Juice, Dave Sadler. On this week's episode, we will go over some headlines in the world of mixed martial arts. We will also recap UFC 185 from this past weekend, and we will pick the main card fights for UFC Fight Night 62, Maia vs. LaFlare, this Saturday on Fox Sports 1. As I already said, I'm your host, Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm, and he is my co-host, the Juice, Dave Sadler, at Vigilante Juice on Twitter. And how's it going, Dave?
It was 80 degrees the other day, and now it's like 48. So my head is just, it cannot wrap around it. I have a headache this big, Jim, this big. Remember that commercial?
Yeah.
I have a headache
Need
this
some
big.
head-on applied directly to the forehead.
Yeah. No, finally the snow's melting, get to hang out with the kids outside, get to throw the ball with the dogs and all that kind of stuff, so everything's going good, and moving towards spring, and, everything's good. Good fights this past weekend, got a couple coming up this weekend. Our good friend Cody Bollinger's fighting this weekend, how about that?
Yes, and I believe today is his birthday.
Is it today or... Yeah, today. He's cutting weight, and it's his birthday.
Oh,
That's
man.
exciting.
No cake. Man. Well, he'll have cake once he wins.
Good. Yeah.
He's fighting for Titan FC. It's this Friday,
It
correct?
It is this Friday on Access.
Oh, it's on Access? I thought they had to deal with CBS Sports.
I thought he said, you know what? He posted something on his Facebook. Let me double check.
Well, it's one of those networks.
Yeah.
Check your local listings for Titan FC this weekend in Alabama, I believe.
It is in Alabama.
So.
In Mobile, Alabama. How about that?
That's right.
I'm efforting the broadcast.
I'm almost certain it's on CBS Sports
Yeah, I'm pretty
Network.
sure you're right.
But, yeah, so good luck to Cody this weekend. And also our good friend Jason Fisher, he will be fighting up in Canada this weekend. He's one of the training partners of Darren Cruikshank. We've had him on the show several times. So he will be fighting, I believe, for a smaller promotion in Alberta. So good luck to Jason Fisher on his fight this weekend as well. All right, before we move on, Dave, we had St. Patrick's Day yesterday. Anything exciting for St. Patrick's Day go down in the Sadler household?
No.
No?
The kids wore green T-shirts to school. My son had karate, and I went to work.
Well, one of the local pizza places I frequent had green dough for St. Patrick's Day. They dyed the dough green, so I partook. Either way you want to look at that. I had some green pizza dough, so that was a nice twist. It didn't taste any different. It just looked green, so that was pretty cool. And then, as most people know, I usually watch the movie Boondock Saints on St. Patrick's Day. So that was my St. Patrick's Day.
So you partook. So now in the past, you would have been partaking? Is that how that works?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
I don't
great.
use that word a lot, so I think we did that right. Someone will probably, if we're wrong, someone will correct us. That's the great thing about the internet.
Yep. Probably very rudely they'll correct us as well.
Yeah. Good thing we can always delete the comments. Just kidding, we don't delete people's comments. So, all right, let's get to some headlines here. Let's start our first real quick. UFC announcing some new dates, not new dates, new venues for future dates. Nashville, Houston, and San Diego all getting events coming up here in the summer. All three cities actually have not hosted an event in quite a while. It's been since UFC 166 for Houston. Nashville hasn't had. They had the first ever UFC on Fox was on Nashville, or UFC on FX. So it's been a while for Nashville. And then San Diego hasn't hosted a UFC event since 2010. But they did, however, feature Ronda Rousey's last Strikeforce fight a couple of years ago in 2012 when she defeated Sarah Kaufman. So they're not a stranger to having kind of big-time events. So those are the upcoming dates. Of course, a lot of those fights, no fights have been announced yet, but those are the new venues. And so just wanted to pass that information along. And speaking of, yeah, I don't know, I might go to that one. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably saw that. I'm thinking about it. That's right around my birthday, so that's more reason to attend. And I've never been to Nashville. I have been to Tennessee, never been to Nashville. So I heard that's a pretty cool place. So that's another reason might check it out. So
yep.
That might be my next excursion. We shall see, though. I'll keep everyone posted. All right, let's see. Speaking of news, one of our favorite fighters, Dave, Carlos Condit, the natural-born killer, as most know, injured very badly in his fight against Tyron Woodley quite a while ago. I believe that was the undercard of, was that 171? That was the Lawler-Hendricks 1. I believe they were the co-main event for. And he got hurt in that fight, has not fought since, but he will be back. The natural killer will be back, and they're not giving him anyone easy, Dave, for his first fight back, as he is set to main event UFC Fight Night 67 in Brazil against another former title contender in the Pitbull, Thiago Alves. And it doesn't look like, it will also feature Jessica Penne will also be on that card from
right.
Tough 20, and also the first female Tough Order. No, that's Juliana Pena. I'm sorry. Juliana Lima will fight Jessica Penne. I read that wrong. I just saw both names, Ultimate Fighter, female fighters. But anyways, so those will be the two big fights there for UFC Fight Night 67. Really excited to see Carlos back in action. I think he's one of the best guys in the division. I think a lot of people, if they've kind of been watching what the welterweight division's kind of going through, it feels like Carlos has kind of not been talked about at all because of his injury. It's glad to see him back. And Thiago Alves, he had that great comeback fight against Seth Basinski, really exciting. And then, coming from the jaws of defeat against the young kid there and Jordan Meehan to knock him out. And surprising, for as long as these guys have been in the UFC, Dave, they have never fought each other. So this is a matchup I think that, you look at as not only a great main event of a fight night, but one I think some fans have been looking forward to, and it should be a very exciting fight.
Yeah, it definitely should be an exciting fight. The injury that Condit got is a tough one to come back from, so it'll be interesting to see, somebody that's got as good a movement and all that kind of stuff that Condit has. It'll be interesting to see how he responds when he gets back in there. And, the fan in me would like to see Condit win that fight and maybe rerun the Woodley fight, because I thought that was starting to be a really good fight before the injury, and I would love to see kind of how it played out.
Absolutely, and like I said, and the winner puts themselves right back in title contention, either gentleman, and that should be a fun one. Then, like we said, Jessica Penne against Juliana Lima. I thought Penne is very close to a title shot. I mean, she had that very, very close semifinal fight against Carla, and then she goes on and has a tough, gritty performance in a victory over Randa Marcos. If she can beat Juliana Lima, I think she's very close to getting a shot at the new champion, Johanna, that we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, that division's wide open, so gotta have an if you're at 115 pounds and you want a title shot, you need to look impressive in your next bout to kind of cement cement yourself as the number one lady.
And just to remind fans, UFC Fight Night 67 will be May 30th down in Brazil, and probably will be on Fox Sports 1. Pretty sure.
Or Fight Pass.
Yeah, maybe, but most likely Fox Sports 1. I'll have to double check, but I'm pretty sure. One last thing here, a couple Bellator notes. Alexander Shlemenko failed multiple attempts here on his last fight against Melvin Manhove. This is probably the biggest name we've really seen out of Bellator. Coming out and failing a drug test. Obviously, we haven't really seen Bellator go through this as much as the UFC, Dave, so it'll be interesting to see how Bellator handles it. It's not surprising that someone tested positive. I'm no longer shocked here for mixed martial arts, but I am interested to see how Bellator deals with the situation. That I think will be interesting to see because unlike the UFC, it hasn't been as prevalent. And well, maybe it has, but it definitely hasn't happened to as big a stars for Bellator. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, just another name. It's not good. It's just not good. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of witty insight, but I just, like you said, it's not surprising that he was hot on the test, and yeah, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it's become commonplace.
All right, well, last thing here, Bellator still moving on with their suit against Rampage Jackson to try to not have him fight for the UFC at UFC 186 against Fabio Maldonado, currently scheduled for next month at UFC 186, as I mentioned, the end of April. And again, we've said it several times, Jackson and his management team have claimed that Bellator breached his contract by not providing pay-per-view numbers for his fight against King Mo in conjunction with not offering him a fight within 120 days, and that, according to a clause, allowed him to kind of come out of it. Bellator is kind of arguing that there was still a matching clause regardless of the amount of days without being offering some type of fight or providing any type of pay-per-view release. And I guess that's kind of where they're at now. That's still going through the court process, but as of right now, nothing has stopped Rampage Jackson from fighting with the UFC. The fight has not been scrapped, and like I said, even if something is proven that he breached his contract or whatnot, by the time it gets found out, Rampage will probably have already fought Fabio Maldonado. So once again, I'm not really sure what Bellator is gaining by doing this. I understand the whole Eddie Alvarez thing. I kind of get that. That made sense to go to bat for someone you were trying to keep, a guy that you helped build your organization on. I get the whole dispute with Eddie Alvarez, but Rampage Jackson has not done that much for Bellator. He hasn't made his name off of Bellator. He made his name as a Pride and UFC fighter and a UFC champion, and he will be remembered as such. Bellator will be a blip on the radar for Quentin Rampage Jackson. No one's going to remember. When you sit back and think about Rampage, are you going to go, man, remember when Rampage is Bellator? That's not going to be brought up too much. And I'm saying this as a fan of Quentin Rampage Jackson. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to remember this guy. They're going to remember the guy who knocked out Chuck Liddell at UFC 71 and stole his title. That's what Quentin Rampage Jackson is going to be remembered for. He's not going to remember for beating a mediocre Joey Beltran and King Mo. So right. I don't get why Bellator is still pursuing this. We just talked about the Shlemenko thing. To me, that's bigger to deal with, and maybe booking solid main events is what they should be focusing on, not Quentin Rampage Jackson.
Yeah. It, like you said, put up the fight, I guess, if you're Bellator, but by the time everything gets resolved, the fight's already going to take place. I'm sure that there's some sort of clause that once they get to within 3 or 4 days of the fight, if nothing's been figured out, I don't think that they're just going to pull Rampage off on a Saturday and be like, yeah, due to Bellator's whatever, he can't fight or whatever. There's probably 100 clauses, but yeah, just let him fight. That's my thought. Just let him fight.
All right. Let's get to UFC 185 here. This past weekend, Dallas, Texas, 5 fights on the main card. And before we get to the main card, real quickly, Dave, we had some very impressive performances on the undercard. We had Germaine de Rotamy. She was able to win her fight knockout in the second round. Also, Joe Duffy, he is known as the last man to beat Conor McGregor. He was successful in his UFC debut as he won by knockout in the first round over Jake Lindsay. And then Ryan Benoit defeated Anthony Pettis' little brother Sergio Pettis, knocking him out in the second round. Very impressive victory as Sergio Pettis, his UFC flyweight debut. Obviously, he was the RFA flyweight champion, so in his return back to 125, huge win for Benoit, knocking him out in the second round. Jared Roseholt got another win, knocking out Josh Copeland in the third round. Unfortunately, our good friend Derek Cruikshank, he lost, submitted in the second round to Beneil Dariush, but big ups to Beneil Dariush, great performance there. Elias Thoreau, a guy that was kind of boring on the show, had a pretty good performance against Sheldon Westcott. Starting to look more and more like a guy who actually can get finishes here, Davis. He got another finish here, second round knockout over Roger Navarez. And then how about Ross Pearson there? What a knockout there of Sam Stout. Boy, I think, yes, he got a performance of the night. He's had some good knockouts in the UFC, Dave, but boy, that might be the best one there. That huge left hand. And Sam Stout's a tough dude to take him out in the second round. And that's a very nice bounce-back win for Ross Pearson after getting knocked out by Iaquinta a couple months ago.
Yeah, it was a good bounce-back. The knockout was that was one of those where Stout got caught. He got nailed, but he got up and he was kind of like, man, I cannot believe I just got caught. It was kind of a wild exchange. It was fun. It was a good fight between two crafty veterans, and somebody went down. It was a good fight. This has to kind of be the last hurrah for Ross Pearson. If he's going to try to get it into a title shot or into that title contention, I think this is kind of that last run towards that. So that's a good start on the journey.
All right, well, let's get to the main card. First fight of the evening in the flyweight division, former title challenger Chris Carriazo took on the former Olympic gold medalist Henry Cejudo. And boy, we said in the pre-fight, Dave, if it stayed standing, Carriazo could kind of grind him out, on the feet, not exactly explosive knockout power, and that Henry had to take this to the ground, use his wrestling background. And he was able to do that flawlessly, as he pretty much dominated the former #1 contender, taking him down 6-7 times, and ended up outstriking him 111-41. That's about as dominant as it gets. And Henry's a guy that we talked about Horiguchi. Obviously he's getting his title shot, but honestly, Horiguchi against Henry here would have been a great matchup to set up a #1 contender, is try to get some fresh blood in the flyweight division for Mr. Mighty Mouse Johnson. But with Horiguchi kind of already getting thrust into his place, I know Henry said he's looking for top-tier talent. Joseph Benavidez now, to me, is the measuring stick. If you can somehow get by him, you're definitely worthy of fighting Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. And I would say that's too quick, too soon, but when you've already won Olympic gold, I'm not sure if there's that much that intimidates you, or that much more that is that much tougher for you, I guess, to face. So I would like to see Henry against Joseph Benavidez, if at all possible.
Yeah, it sounded like Henry was going to fight. I thought they verbally agreed to somebody.
I know he was talking about Jussier Formiga in Mexico City, and I do think that's a solid matchup, but I'm just saying, if you can get by Joseph Benavidez, I think that means a lot more. Jussier Formiga's solid, but he's already got knocked out a couple of times. He's a top 10 flyweight, but he's not as dangerous as Joseph Benavidez.
Yeah, I'd like to see him fight the Formiga guy, just to make sure that making 125 wasn't
yeah, that's true.
Wasn't a one-time deal before they give him a big-time fight like Benavidez. If he's going to put a whooping on Formiga like he did on Saturday, it won't take very long anyway. So, maybe round out his year with a fight against Benavidez. But he looked awfully impressive in that fight. And it seems like, they gave Carriazo the title shot at 178. And it seems like I read somewhere that he had a panic attack like an hour before his fight or something. And it seems like he just doesn't look comfortable in the cage anymore, Carriazo. Like, too much too fast or something.
Well, obviously it was. I think that shot against Mighty Mouse Johnson was something that he wasn't expecting. We've interviewed Luis Smolka a couple times on the show. Great flyweight, definitely up and coming guy, but beating him and then going to a title shot is an awfully big jump.
Yeah.
And again, injury to John Dodson has kind of forced one, now I guess you could say two, quicker than usual title shots. And Carrieza was a guy who had kind of been hanging around for a while. The UFC liked his win and offer him Mighty Mouse Johnson. And if you're Chris Carrieza, you've been around for a while, they offer you a title shot. When is the chances you're going to get one again?
Right.
So you take it. You take it. And I don't blame him for taking it. But I think taking it and then realizing I'm in a main event, I'm headlining this card, I'm fighting the best guy I'll probably ever face in my career. That even though it was a win-win situation regardless of what happened for him because nobody expected him to win, that still can create head games for you. And maybe coming into this fight, he still was looked on as the favorite despite of Henry's wrestling credentials. He's the guy that just fought for the title. And maybe kind of that with worrying about wrestling, other things, maybe played with his head with a little bit. I don't know. I mean, Henry had a flawless game plan. He executed to perfection. He definitely has world-class skills, but I think Carrieza might have to just take a couple months off to regroup and maybe reassess that this is still what he wants to do as his career. All right, the next fight of the evening was in the heavyweight division as Roy Nelson took on Alistair Overeem. And boy, I just thought this was a fantastic fight, Dave. Both guys throwing bombs at each other. Of course, you have the big overhand and rights of Roy Nelson and his hooks. Then, of course, you got the kicks and knees and power punches there of Alistair Overeem. Both guys testing each other's chins, throwing bombs. How neither got knocked out, Dave, I don't know. But somehow this thing did last 15 minutes. Looking at the total numbers here, Alistair Overeem outstruck Nelson 62-23. And the only round, there was only one round, Dave, where Roy Nelson landed more than 10 strikes, and that was the first round. And that probably would have been the only round I would have gave Roy. I would have gave Overeem rounds 2 and 3. The judges didn't see fit to give Nelson any rounds, as it was unanimous 30-27. I thought it was a little closer fight than that. Now, obviously, you look, he got severely outstriked, but the bombs Roy Nelson was able to land with those 23 were definitely significant and definitely hurt Mr. Alistair Overeem. And I think Overeem showed that he still has some holes in his game. He still needs to work on his footwork. He still needs to keep his hands up. But he still showed that I think he showed that he's developed a little bit because he didn't rush in too much in this. Like we've seen in previous fight, him rush in for the finish, then him getting tired, and then getting knocked out later. That was kind of a theme in his first UFC fights. These last couple ones, he's been a little more patient, and I think that's the Overeem that has to be to win a championship. But like I said, he has to clean up the footwork and keeping his hands up, because if that Alistair Overeem shows up against Velasquez or Junior Dos Santos, he's probably going to get knocked out because he's not keeping his hands up.
Yeah, I was confused in this fight, and I learned something. I learned that neither one of these guys is going to beat Cain Velasquez, and I was confused because everybody was saying what a great fight this was, and it just didn't seem... I know they were throwing bombs, but it seemed like there was a lot of throw and then move, and I don't know. Roy was taking a beating with kicks and body punches and stuff like that, but to me, it was just kind of like, come on. And I mean, I guess everyone's entitled to their opinion, but it just wasn't a fight that I was like, oh, this is great. I'd like to rewatch it on my DVR now. But
I think the reason you're saying this is because it wasn't combinations they were throwing. It was one or two big shots, that fighter taking it, then a couple of whiffs. In fact, you could probably say a lot of whiffs. I mean, Roy Nelson was officially 23 of 77, not exactly a great percentage. And then Overeem a little more accurate there, 62-84, but those weren't all big bombs. He did land quite a few kicks and some knees in combination with those strikes. So I kind of get what you're saying, but at heavyweight, obviously you're going to move a little slower. You're not going to be as fast as some of those, like the flyweights we just saw before. But like I said, I think it was a step in the right direction for Overeem. Like you said, did that performance lead me to believe that he's going to beat Cain Velasquez? No, he still has to work some things. But as I said in the pre-fight, Overeem winning does more for the division. It can set up Overeem Jr. dos Santos, which we've been waiting for a very, very long time. And I as of right now, I'd still pick Jr. dos Santos, but I'm just very intrigued by that fight. I'm very intrigued by JDS Overeem, and I don't know when that's going to happen, but UFC on Fox July 25th is looking for a main event
in Chicago.
I think that would be a good one for it.
Our friend DK tweeted me, said, "Hey, Roy Nelson's martial arts doesn't seem so mixed, does it? I thought he was a black belt in jiu-jitsu."
He is, but he was 0 for 4 on takedowns.
Yeah.
So there goes using that jiu-jitsu black belt. And let's not forget, Roy Nelson is 5'11", 250 pounds. Alistair Overeem is 6'5", and 255 pounds, and completely jacked.
Yeah. I mean, when's the last time that you saw him use his jiu-jitsu in a fight? I think that's more of his point.
Right. Well, throw that away, though. Just Roy Nelson trying to take down Overeem was going to be a bad idea. He's just so physically strong. You have to be an elite-level wrestler to try to take that man down. You know what I mean? You can't throw in half-ass takedowns against Alistair Overeem and expect that to work.
Yeah, I gotcha. Nelson's lucky that he's in the heavyweight division, where it doesn't matter if you've lost 2 or 3 in a row. You're still really only 2 fights away from a title shot.
All right, looking at the next fight of the evening, welterweight division, Johnny Hendricks, former title holder, against Matt Brown. And this kind of went the way I expected it, Dave. We said in the pre-fight, wasn't if Johnny Hendricks could take down Matt Brown. It was when he took him down, what would Matt Brown do off his back? What could he do to cause Johnny Hendricks problems? And the answer in this fight was nothing, as Johnny Hendricks took down Matt Brown 9 of 10 times and outstruck him 85-39. That was the story of this fight. Matt Brown, it didn't seem like there was a sense of urgency, and we didn't see that Matt Brown kind of pressure, and what do they call it, like aggressive brawling or tactical brawling that he's known for.
He's a tactical brawler.
We didn't see that in this fight. And I was talking with a friend. I kind of get the first round. You're feeling him out. You don't want to use up all your energy. You're maybe trying for a little submission, just trying to not take as much damage. But rounds 2 and 3, how is Matt Brown just not going berserk when he's on the bottom with elbows and punches, or when it's briefly standing, not just throwing the kitchen sink at him? I mean, after the first round, it was apparent what Johnny Hendricks was going to do to you. He was going to take you down with a powerful slam and punch you in the face. It was simple as that. He had no, there was no way he was going to stand with you. There was no way.
Right.
And it was apparent that you weren't going to stop him from taking you down. So I don't know if he has had some trouble making weight here, Dave. I know people have focused on Hendricks making weight, but I believe Matt Brown missed weight for his fight against Robbie Lawler. So that is something you have to look to. And I don't know if it was conditioning or what, but the Matt Brown we've seen in the last 2 fights was not the Matt Brown we saw in a 6-fight winning streak. Now, I know he's faced higher competition, Dave. I know that. But the strategy he used to win those 6 fights has not been seen in these 2 fights, regardless of the level of competition.
It's 100. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I don't know what causes that. A lot of people got on the Matt Brown bandwagon because he's, like it said in the lead up to the fight, he's one of those guys that he always tries to be better. If someone's doing 20 push-ups, he's going to do 25. You know, it's an easy guy to get behind because even when he's losing, he comes back, he fights hard, and we all want to. It's easy to root for that guy. But then when he comes out there, like you said, why wasn't he going absolutely nuts on the bottom? Do something. You knew you were going to be stuck in that position. Just do something. And nothing was done.
Now, for Johnny Hendricks, it's a win. Not his most impressive win, but he got the job done in his hometown. Dana White wasn't too impressed, so
No.
as of now, it doesn't look as though he's going to get the winner of Rory and Lawler. But with that, it could set up a very interesting fight against either Hector Lombard or Tyron Woodley.
I like those both. I like them both.
Yeah, so either way, I think that's one of his two opponents, and if he beats one of those two gentlemen, or vice versa, one of those two gentlemen beat him, that's your next title contender.
Yep. I still want to see Tyron Woodley, Carlos Condit, so if we could get that in the mix somehow, that'd be great.
You never know with injuries and dates and taking time off how things work, but yeah, like I said, him against Thiago Alves puts the winner right in the mix, so I'm sure, and that's coming up in May too, so that's a fight to look out for as well. But
don't forget, Brian Ebersol's fighting Alan Joubuen in June, so if you're looking for another crafty veteran at 170.
True that. All right. Speaking of crafty, but it wasn't a veteran, it was kind of a crafty newcomer of sorts, is Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Her first big-time fight. Gets a title shot against Carla Esparza, the #1 strawweight in the world, and has been the #1 strawweight in the world for quite a few years. And despite the great wrestling credentials of Carla Esparza, Dave, she looked kind of like a freshman high school wrestler against a seasoned veteran. You would have thought that Joanna was the wrestling expert with the way she was sprawling and brawling in this fight, but that was not the case, as the first ever strawweight champion was just absolutely shut down and taken out of her element. You want to talk sprawling, Bellator, Dave? How about stopping 16 of 17 takedowns?
That's a kind of misleading, don't you think?
I mean, some of those. You could say some of those takedowns weren't with her full heart, but I mean, still. However, let's say 10 of them are real.
Okay.
She stopped 9 out of 10. However way you look at it, she shut her down. Okay?
Right.
She was Richard Sherman for the Seattle Seahawks. All right, she was the shutdown corner. Shut down Carla, took her out of her game plan, and when it stood on the feet, how do you like outstriking your opponent 55-6 in a fight that went 8 minutes?
Yeah, that'll win. That'll win you some fights.
That's the strategy. When Dave and I were picking this fight, we thought Carla has not been stopped. Really, anyone she's fought, she has not been stopped with her takedowns. Taking on a kickboxer, first time in the spotlight. We thought, well, maybe she will be champion, but maybe it's not right now. Well, we were wrong on this one. I will fully admit that. I thought Carla was going to have a little easier time taking down the woman from Poland, but that was not the case. And when it came to the feet, Carla had no answer for Joanna, and she kind of poured it on there in the middle of the second round and got the knockout at the 4:17 marker to become the first European champion in 12 years, I believe, since Andrei Arlovski. This is the first time Europe has had a champion representative, and it's only the third European champion overall. Her, Arlovski, and Bas Rutten are the only European champions. So quite a big deal. And I gotta believe she's going to be all over that UFC event in Poland here in a couple weeks as kind of her big homecoming to Poland and showing off the title and everything. So great performance by Joanna, and Carla proved that even though she was #1 for a while, she still has a lot of work to be done if she wants to get that title back.
Yep. When the fight ended, the first thing that I did, my friend Aaron, hold on a second. I was trying to stall while I tell this story. So the first thing I did, when my friend Aaron was here for the fight, and I said to him, man, I think I picked both, because funny story. UFC 184, I picked Raquel Pennington and Kat Zingano to win. I put $20 down with a chance to win like 700. And they both got beat. The same bet, if I would have made the same bet on Saturday, both underdogs in the main and co-main won. I wonder how much money I would have won. And then I went back and listened to last week's episode, and I didn't pick Joanna. I was like, oh, I thought I got ahead of you finally in picks. But I didn't. So with Joanna, very impressive performance. She dominated. I mean, she pretty much had a perfect game plan against Carla. Stopped the wrestling. She knew her hands were better. So basically, for that camp, she needed to focus on takedowns. And I'm sure that was an enormous part of her camp, was takedown, takedown, takedown. You know? And when you know you're superior in one part or another, she doesn't have to drill that as much. And I keep reading online that Carla Esparza was going, she's got some stuff going on in life, and you know, she's had a lot of things happen to her in her personal life outside of the cage. And the people who keep reporting it, that I keep seeing on Twitter and Facebook, I think it's ridiculous to even report that, because everybody has stuff going on outside of the cage, and I think it's disrespectful to Joanna, because Carla went in there trying to get her win bonus and defend her belt. If whatever was going on was so bad, she should have just pulled out of the fight. You know, I think it's disrespectful, because Joanna was training and all that, came in, implemented her game plan, and, for lack of a better term, destroyed the Cookie Monster.
Yeah, I don't know. Unless to me it's a physical injury. I know mental is part of the game, but a lot of fighters, when they go into the cage, that's their release from all the other stuff.
Right.
So your personal stuff shouldn't affect your performance in the cage, especially when, I hate to bring this up, but the fact, I mean, I know you're training and stuff, but realistically you're fighting once. You know, you fight how many times? Like, that's your technical job. You may only get to do that 3 or 4 times in a year.
Right.
It's not like if you're playing baseball or basketball where you're playing 82 times in a year.
Right.
And you're trying to be your best at 82 times. Now, I'm not trying to undersell mixed martial art fighters, because obviously they're training every day. They're working just as hard as other athletes. But I'm saying when it comes time for you to perform, to get paid for what you're doing, that stuff shouldn't matter. And for a woman like Carla, who's accomplished so much, I mean, she's about as old as me, 25 years old. You know, for where she's been and what she's accomplished, I don't think that stuff phases her. I mean, she was the Invicta champion. She got to be the #1 fighter. I mean, she used to wrestle guys in high school and then went on to wrestle collegiately against women. I mean, she seems like a very strong and motivated individual. I find it hard to believe that some family stuff, no matter how big or small, would have affected her performance that much.
Right. So Joanna's probably going to be at that Poland show, obviously, with her belt, walking around.
I would imagine.
You think they'll play this song?
My kingdom awaits, and they've forgiven my
Possibly.
sins. I'm coming home. I'm coming home.
I don't know if they'll have any type of ceremony, but they'll definitely show her in the crowd.
Yeah. I just wish I need to have, when we upgrade to Beyond the Cage Studios, I need to have a soundboard with all the songs that I find relevant. You know what I mean?
Sure, you could buy one.
Yeah. That's next on the list.
Wait, your birthday's in a couple months, right?
My birthday is right around the Nashville show, just like yours.
Oh, well, maybe we'll meet each other in Nashville. But you can give a hint to someone like, hey, wink, wink, might need a soundboard.
Hey, AJ Hiller from MMA Signatures.
There you go. That's who I was talking about. And it'll be signed by Matt Hamill.
Yeah. Wait.
You'll
Never
be the
mind.
only one that has a signed Matt Hamill soundboard.
Is it?
There you go.
That's not very nice.
What? He's
A
good friends with Matt
soundboard?
Hamill.
Sound by Matt.
I wasn't even Think about that.
Okay.
I was just saying because
And
he's from
other-
Pennsylvania. It has nothing to do. Oh, you're making it seem like I'm making a weird joke or something now. That's not what I was intending at all.
It's all right. Moving on. Main event. UFC 185.
All right, let's get to the main event of UFC 185. Anthony Pettis against Rafael Dos Anjos. Another, speaking of dominant performances by the challenger in the title fight, that's what we saw here in this one, and it wasn't, it didn't end in the finish, but 15 minutes of domination from Rafael Dos Anjos against the champion Anthony Pettis, and we kind of talked about Gilbert Melendez, giving a blueprint as to how to beat Anthony Pettis. It was just a matter of could Dos Anjos do that and not get caught by some type of submission or some type of strike that got him knocked out, and the answer was no, he would not get caught in some type of strike or submission, as he took Pettis down 9 of 10 times and outstruck him 144-96. And the only round, I guess to me, that was really close might have been the first round, as Pettis was only outstruck by 3. But as this fight moved on, Dave, it was more takedowns and just more getting outstruck and really just not having an answer for what Dos Anjos was doing. As the big round there was round 2, where Dos Anjos outstruck Pettis 46-19, and I think really once that round cemented, I got in my mind like, man, I don't know if he can catch him in something. He got beat up pretty badly, and I don't know, he's going to have to do something crazy in the next 15 minutes, and he wasn't able to. And after the fight, it came out that Pettis somewhere in that first and second round suffered a concussion, and that and also it came out that Rafael Dos Anjos about 2 weeks before the fight had torn his MCL. So both fighters had something going on. Now, is the concussion the sole reason his performance was bad, heading on to the fight? I'm going to say no. It didn't help. It most certainly did not help his cause, but I think by that point that it happened, it was already looking like he wasn't going to be able to do much about his situation unless Dos Anjos completely gaffed on something. But just an incredible performance. First you had the one by Joanna, and now Rafael Dos Anjos. And it's crazy to think that this guy's first fight, Dave, back in 2006, he got knocked out by a huge uppercut by Jeremy Stevens. And he has worked his way since that point and is now the champion. And it was kind of a joke there for a while that Mike Goldberg always said, oh, this guy's had a meteoric rise. But I don't think anyone has had quite a meteoric rise like Rafael Dos Anjos. I mean, he went from getting knocked out by Jeremy Stevens to just, I know it seems like a long time, but like 8 years later, becoming the #1 fighter in the world and the UFC lightweight champion. And to go along with a little history, he's the first ever Brazilian lightweight champion as well. So just a great all-around performance and just an incredible journey by Rafael Dos Anjos to get to where he is now.
Rafael Dos Anjos is a perfect example of how to use Fight Pass. If you go on and search his name, you can see all of his fights. The perfect use of the digital library that they have at UFC.tv. It's pretty impressive. You can kind of see him grow through all the fights. Our friend DK says, I'll have you answer this question. Pettis, in regards to Pettis versus RDA, is the hole in Pettis' game the lack of circling and head movement? Looked like he literally froze after the ref said fight.
Normally I would say no, because I think if you look at the first fight against Ben Henderson, I think he had that down.
Let me add a point.
In this fight, it was not apparent.
Do you think that's a lack of when he fought Ben Henderson before? Do you think that's he was comfortable with kind of like the familiarity with Ben Henderson and having not been in the cage with Dos Anjos?
I was talking about the first fight with Ben Henderson, not the second one. The WEC fight.
Oh, okay.
Which he obviously wouldn't have fought Henderson before.
Right.
Obviously, the second one ended one really quickly. I don't that the footwork didn't really come into play in that one. But you know what I mean. If you go back and watch that first fight, I think he did a great job in that fight with his footwork and head movement. So I don't think it's something that he can't do. I think maybe he knew Dos Anjos was going to come right at him with takedowns, so maybe he was kind of accepting half the battle, like I'm probably going to be up against the cage, I got to get ready to work on that situation. And maybe he was already kind of like maybe circling that's not going to do something, I got to be prepared for what he's going to do. And I think he was maybe too worried about the takedown instead of going out there and doing what he does naturally. But by the time, again, the third round rolls around, he's already been beat up, and the time for what he needed to do, which is exactly what DK was saying, footwork and head movement, I think he was already kind of beaten beyond the point of return. You know? So I think that should have been his strategy. He didn't implement it. And again, it's imposing your will in this game. Whoever can impose their will. And Rafael dos Anjos imposed his will on Anthony Pettis. And I think maybe kind of broke him a little bit. You add in the concussion, and Pettis didn't have an answer for it.
Yeah. Once again, you hear people talk about, like, he closed his eye with one punch, couldn't see. Once again, I still think that's disrespectful to somebody like Dos Anjos. He punched him directly in the eye, and it closed it up. It's a part of the fight, and had it been reversed, they would talk about how great the striking of Pettis was, to cause the injury, and you lost the fight. He got beat by a better guy last Saturday. Can Dos Anjos beat Pettis 5 more times? I don't know. But the time that it counted last Saturday, he won. And I picked him to win on this show right here.
Great performance by Dos Anjos. It looks as though he's going to get the winner of Nurmagomedov and Donald Cerrone, which I like because it's a rematch either way for either gentleman. And with Dos Anjos, like I said, kind of being an unlikely champion, a guy most people still don't know, even though he's been in the UFC for years. Like I said, the meteoric rise. I think for his next title defense, it's perfect that he would fight either Nurmagomedov or Cerrone, because he's a new champion. You're trying to sell him now as the #1 fighter, and you can pit him up against either kind of the hot rising star and Nurmagomedov, who already beat him once. That's a great angle to sell a fight. Or you can, I think everyone's starting to fall in love with the Cowboy, Dave. If the Cowboy gets there, that's a real easy fight to sell, Cowboy against RDA. So I think either way for the UFC, it really works out for his next title defense.
Right. Do you think, looking back at it, I said it in for our picks for Combat Cardboard, and I said it on our picks here. Do you think that he looked past Dos Anjos, Pettis?
No, because he already beat Cerrone. So if you look at if he would have won the same fights, the winner of that fight still would have been presented to him. Nurmagomedov again maybe would have been exciting, but he already beat Cerrone once, so I don't know how interested he was in fighting Cerrone again.
Right.
So it's hard for me to say that he looked past Cerrone. And you've had a fair criticism. A lot of others, he's been injured. He's kind of been talked about a lot there, and he only had like the one title defense. So I think a lot of people were kind of down on him for a while because of the whole injury thing and not having that many fights and stuff. So I think that the fact he got the fight relatively quickly after his first fight in over a year, I think he was motivated to kind of prove people wrong, and that his fight against Gilbert wasn't a fluke. So I think he was definitely motivated for this fight, and I don't think he looked past Dos Anjos at all.
Fair enough.
All right, let's get to the next fight here. UFC Fight Night 62. Not kind of a, when you look at what we just saw for 181, Dave, definitely a letdown here, transitioning to Fight Night 62. No offense to any of the guys and gals fighting on the card, but not quickly the same star power here for Fight Night 62. There are a couple of interesting fights, however, on the card. 6 fights will be shown on the main card, as I mentioned. Fox Sports 1 next Saturday, or this Saturday on the 21st. One matchup, if anyone gets a chance on the undercard, I am interested in seeing Drew Dober. He's coming off a victory over Jamie Varner. He's fighting Leandro Silva. That should be a pretty pretty interesting matchup in terms of the undercard. That's one I'm kind of looking forward to. But let's get to the main card here. First fight of the evening, Dave, featherweight division, as Goffredo Pepe Castro, a former member of the Ultimate Fighter Brazil 1. He's taking on Andre Touchy-Feely. Looking at Pepe, he is 3-3 in the UFC. His last fight was a win over Deshaun Johnson at the Bigfoot Orlovsky Fight Night, and 6 of his 11 career victories are by submission. Looking at Feely, 2-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a win over Felipe Arantes at UFC 179, and 7 of his 14 career victories are by knockout. Now, despite the submission background, Dave, Mr. Pepe has shown a willingness to kind of stand and bang, and I think that goes perfectly with what Andre Feely likes to do as well. Now, Feely does have some wrestling background, and as I mentioned, Pepe does have some submissions, but it will be interesting to see if Feely gets kind of brought into the brawl that Pepe likes to do, and whether or not he can kind of keep up, because some people have not been able to come out of that brawl. And if it goes to the ground, I think it's interesting, because I think Feely does have some grappling, but he has been caught in a couple submissions, and Pepe's tricky off his back. I do think it's an interesting fight, and I think a decent fight to start off the card, but I think this one is kind of a pick'em fight. I think this is a very, very close matchup here at 145.
Yeah, it's the interesting thing about these cards that are on Fox Sports 1 that aren't loaded with names. There's probably some good fights that people are going to pass up because they don't know these guys. And I agree. I think this fight's a pick'em fight. And, you know, in 2 years, these guys might be at the top of the division. You know, T.J. Dillashaw. Who was T.J. Dillashaw 2 years ago? You know what I mean? So, perfect example. Why you should tune in on Saturday is a fight like this. You know, both of these guys have the skills, and somebody's got to take that step forward. We're going to see it Saturday, and you know, we'll see what goes down. But you know, I agree 100%. I think it's a pick'em fight. I think even the line, the betting line, has it almost a pick'em fight.
The next fight of the evening, it's in the lightweight division, and that's going to be between a newcomer here in the UFC, and that is Alex Oliveira, as he will take on Gilbert Burns. Looking at the newcomer Oliveira, in his career he is 10-1-1, and he also has a no contest. He is overall riding a 3-fight winning streak, and 8 of his 10 career victories are by knockout. Looking at his opponent, Gilbert Burns, 9-0 in his career, so he's undefeated. 2-0 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Christos Giagos at UFC 179, and of his 9 career victories, 5 are by submission. So, obviously, I don't know a lot about Oliveira. Has never fought in the UFC before. Looks like a very dangerous striker with that high percentage of knockouts, so I'd imagine he'd like to keep it stamping. Burns, obviously, with the submissions, has a penchant for a little bit of a ground game. If I were Burns, I would try to take this thing to the ground and try to wear out Mr. Oliveira, and you never know what Oliveira is going to kind of bring to the table. I don't know how much film there is of Oliveira. I'm not how much Burns can glean, but the fact he's already fought twice already in the UFC, I would kind of lead towards him in this matchup.
Yeah, Alex Oliveira looks a lot like Brian Ebersol. Oh, wait, that is Brian Ebersol. I'm on UFC.com. Remember, told you. Looks like the shadow. Once again, another good fight. Another good breakdown by you, as always. But it's hard for someone to come, it's hard for us to come on here and talk super intelligently about a fight like this when I can't look up one of the guys. This is why I'm going to go on a tangent. This is why these guys need to fight on Fight Pass before they get thrown onto these main cards, unless it's an injury replacement, because you can't actually see them fight anywhere before they're out there in front of the masses. And I don't even know what to pick. Burns has an incredibly weird nickname, Dorito. Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Dorito. So
I wonder if that he just likes Doritos or if that's somehow play Gilbert Dorito Burns. I'm not sure what a Dorito Burn is, but you know what I mean? You know, a lot of these nicknames are ridiculous with how they play with their, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is a Dorito Burn like rubbing a Dorito and you got the streak of orange on you or something, and that's like a Dorito Burn?
It's like on your keyboard.
Like that's how that's his prank. He pranks people. He's a prankster. He gives them Dorito Burns. To me, that's just a waste of Doritos.
Yeah. Or he tells a joke and then he throws a Dorito at him. Dorito Burn! Ah!
Just either way, it's a waste of Doritos, Dave. And I know Doritos aren't that expensive, but I mean, I'm not a guy who goes around and waste Doritos.
Yeah, who would do that?
Especially when you have Mountain Dew with them, right?
Cheers.
See what I did there? All right, let's move on.
You have a Red Wings cup. I have a Sox cup.
I do have a Red Wings cup. I wasn't even know I was using that. All right, let's see here. Women's bantamweight division. Amanda Nunes against Shayna Baszler for our next fight. Looking at Baszler, 0-1 in the UFC. Her only fight was a loss to Betch Kohea at UFC 177, and 14 of her 15 career victories are by submission. Looking at Nunes, 2-1 in the UFC. Her last fight was a loss to Kat Zingano at UFC 178, and 8 of her 9 career victories are by knockout. Basically, if Baszler can get out of the first round, which I don't know if she can, she has a chance to catch Nunes into submission. If she can't, she's going to get knocked out. And really, looking at her last fight against Betch Kohea, Baszler didn't show much of anything in that fight. So I'm not. Shayna, I know she's trained some with Ronda. She has to up her game for this fight, because I think if she loses and she loses badly again, she's going to get cut. There are a lot of talented ladies in this 135 division, and if you lose the two of the better ones awfully, really badly, I don't know if there's room for you.
Yeah.
I think plain and simple. And will that desperation force Baszler to have a good fight? And really, Dave, Baszler just needs something. I mean, even if it's not a win, if she can go out there at least have a solid performance, she can stick around. But it's been a while since Shayna Baszler's had a good performance. I know she won the fight she had to fight to get in to the house on the Ultimate Fighter, and that doesn't officially count as a victory. But other than that, she hasn't won in quite a few years. So she needs to do something here.
That has to play with your mental game.
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, Nunes fighting in her home country. She's trying to bounce back from a fight against Ngannou. But to me, Shayna Baszler has to do something drastic in this fight. Otherwise, she's going to have another loss.
Yep. But I think you said that cardio in this fight is going to be an issue. Nunes looked great in the Zingano fight for about 4 minutes, and then after that it was downhill. So if Baszler can take anything away from that loss, it's that. Kind of weather the storm and you'll be all right.
All right, next fight of the evening, lightweight division. Tony Martin will take on Leandro Santos. Looking at Martin, 1-2 in the UFC. He finally got his first victory in the organization at UFC 179 as he defeated Fabricio Combs, and 7 of his 9 career victories are by submission. Looking at Santos, 2-0-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Efrain Escudero at the Bigfoot Orlovsky Fight Night, and 8 of his 13 career victories are by submission. Now, in the fight that he got a draw, that was a fight against Norman Park. Norman Park really controlled him up against the cage and in the clinch. And so far in the 3 fights I've seen Santos in, that was the only one where he was close to losing, and probably would have lost that fight had it not been for a point taken away from Norman Park. So for Tony Martin, if you can look at that fight and look what Norman Park did, I would try to emulate it that way. Now, could you beat him standing? Possibly. But I think he has a pretty solid stand-up game. On the ground, in terms of submission, just kind of looking at their pedigrees, I would say it's pretty even. I would maybe give a slight edge to Santos, but Martin is a pretty big lightweight, so kind of that size may help him in the grappling there. But I would try to push this thing up against the cage and make it nasty if I'm Tony Martin. I think that's your best chance to win. I think anything else that you do, it becomes a little more even and maybe a little more in Santos' favor.
Yeah. What weight is this? 155.
This 155. Yep.
I'm looking at Martin's picture. It looks like he's about 190.
He's a big dude. I think he's listed at 6 foot or 6'1".
72 inches, so 6 foot, right?
Yeah, so that's a big guy at 155.
Yeah. Santos is also listed at that, but he just doesn't look his stick. Same thing as I've been saying before. These are two guys that probably not every fan knows who they are, but definitely guys that you need to start watching and having an idea of who they are, because coming up they're going to be bigger names. Both of these guys, they have a chance. Look at them. Who has the most fights in the UFC? What'd you say?
They technically both have 3 fights in the UFC.
Yeah, and they're the 3rd fight from the main event already in a Brazil card. So, I mean, the UFC's got a little bit of push behind these guys. So, tune in, check both these guys out, and see who might be, the next group in the lightweight division.
The co-main events of the evening is in the welterweight division as Josh Koscheck will take on Eric Silva. Let's take a look at Josh Koscheck here. 15-9 in the UFC. He is currently riding a 4-fight losing streak. He fought a little under a month ago at UFC 184, where he was submitted in the second round to Jake Ellenberger, and 7 of his 17 career victories are by decision. Now, originally this was supposed to be Ben Saunders, and 2 guys kind of offered up their services. I know Ben Henderson offered up his services, but the UFC instead chose Josh Koscheck. Why? I have no idea. I think I just threw out there and made my point. What led you to believe Josh Koscheck, after his last performance? I think it's safe to say, Dave, I know you like Ben Henderson, but regardless of, your fondness of him, just in terms of actually doing something for the division, doesn't Ben Henderson, Eric Silva do a lot more than Eric Silva and Josh Koscheck?
Yeah, Josh Koscheck can fly himself to Brazil. Does that help?
Well, so can Ben Henderson. It just takes a little more money, I guess. I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. Anyways, Eric Silva, 5-4 in the UFC. Last fight was a win over Mike Rhodes at the Fight Night, Dalloway Machida, and 10 of his 17 career victories are by submission. If Koscheck can get this thing to the ground, he definitely has the wrestling credentials to stifle Eric Silva, and we've seen him get stifled in the past, so that's completely possible. But if Josh Koscheck, who didn't really look like much of anything in that fight against Ellenberger, can't take this fight to the ground and has to resort to stand-up, he still has some power, but Eric Silva is the much better technical striker, and I think has a more variety of strikes at his disposal than Josh Koscheck. And there's also a chance that Eric Silva is pretty slick on the ground. He could catch Koscheck in a submission. And the reason I'm wary of this fight, Dave, is because it was really kind of a grazing punch from Ellenberger that sent Koscheck really into a spiral that led to this submission. So if Eric Silva can land like one decent strike, I think he can phase Koscheck and get a submission. And that's why I'm not super excited about this fight. And even if Koscheck wins, I don't think that really proves a whole lot, to be honest. I mean, Eric Silva is a great talent. He's an exciting guy. But when push comes to shove, when he's taking on guys near or in the top 15, he has lost to them. So it would just be a chalk up of losing to another guy that's good competition. So it doesn't do a whole lot. I'm somewhat intrigued, but like I said, I think the original matchup of Saunders would have been good, or like I said, I think Ben Henderson against Eric Silva would have been awfully intriguing as well.
Yeah, it doesn't do much for the division, like you said, win or lose. Win or lose for Koscheck. The one thing, as I was sitting here thinking about it, the fact that Eric Silva's lose-win, maybe that's why they gave him Koscheck. Because if they bring in Benson, what does a win for Benson do? over a guy who can't seem to put a streak together. I don't think that they make that kind of, they don't put that much thought into it. I don't know. Maybe Koscheck needs to have a certain number of fights by the end of the year, that kind of stuff. But I would rather have seen the Saunders Silva fight. I think that would have been perfect. That way you could give Benson kind of a full camp to prepare for somebody. But yeah, as co-main events go, it's two people that you've heard of before.
Well, I would say considering what the main event is, which we'll get to in a second, this is a pretty solid main event and does add a little more name to it than Ben Saunders against Eric Silva, for what that's worth. All right, main event of the evening, Demian Maia against Ryan LaFlare. And the reason I say this is interesting because when you look at Mr. Ryan LaFlare, although his record is impressive, his last fight was the Ultimate Fight Night in Abu Dhabi when Roy Nelson fought Nogueira. And if you're wondering when that was about a year ago. So not only is Ryan LaFlare main eventing, he has not fought in about a year. Although he's awfully impressive. Undefeated 11-0. 4 of his 11 career victories are by knockout. That fight in Abu Dhabi, he defeated John Howard, and he's 4-0 so far in the UFC. Great credentials, but I don't know if he should have been the main event. Now, Demian Maia, obviously a former title contender, 13-6 in the UFC. His last win was a win over Alexander Yakovlev, not his most notable victory, but he defeated him last year at the Stipe Maldonado fight, and 9 of his 16 career victories are by submission. I honestly think LaFlare should keep this standing, and I think he should very easily be able to outstrike Demian Maia. The risk will come if Maia is somehow able to land or do something, and Ryan LaFlare instinctively goes for a takedown. That'd be about the worst thing I think LaFlare can do.
Worst case scenario.
That would be, yeah. Maia is not a guy you want to mess with on the ground, and most people that have messed with Maia on the ground have lost. Plain and simple. You don't want to engage this guy in the ground. You can ask a lot of people in the UFC that have tried to mix it with him on the ground, and I think just about every one of them have lost. I really can't think of a fight, Dave, where it's been mainly a grappling affair with Demian Maia, and he's lost.
The only one that I can think of is Weidman.
But that was a stand-up fight. He wasn't able to really take him down.
No, that was on the ground. He wrestled him.
Not by much. I don't remember that one had a lot of. That one was a really sloppy fight, regardless, because Weidman had to make weight on like 11. That was not a good. But and obviously he ended up moving down a division. But you get what I'm saying, though. You don't want to grapple with this guy.
Right.
And obviously, with LaFlare being a training partner of Chris Weidman, he should know that, and should know to stay on the feet, and it stays on the feet. I think Ryan LaFlare wins. The question mark, despite LaFlare looking pretty like a well-conditioned guy, he's never fought 25 minutes before. Maia has, and LaFlare's never been a main event before. Maia has, I think 2 or 3 times now. So a lot of new things for Ryan LaFlare, but obviously a step-up opponent, best guy he's probably ever fought in his career. So interesting main event. Needless to say, but one that I don't expect to be too exciting, to be quite honest.
Nope.
Unless one of these guys can finish. I mean, they're capable of it, but I just have a feeling this isn't going to be the greatest main event.
I agree. Demian Maia once fitched Fitch, so being on the ground, probably not the best place for Ryan LaFlare.
And he did it to Jake Shields.
Yes. Isn't that one of the people's name in Dodgeball?
Yeah, I believe that's Vince Vaughn's character's last name, but it's spelled differently. I mean, still pronounced the same, but anyways.
Gotcha.
So as long as he doesn't bleed his own blood, I think he'll be all right.
Do you think Chris Weidman threw a wrench at him at all during training camp?
You know what? I'm going to say no because he might have injured his hand if he threw it.
Hey, $1 down on all the underdogs on this card will bring you back $64,000 on Bovada.
That might not be a bad deal. The last time there was a card in Brazil, there were 10 underdogs winning.
Maybe they don't understand the underdog thing. Those were actually the favorites.
Yeah, in Brazil it's reversed because of the language.
Because it's south of the equator. Wait.
Yeah, south of the equator.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's go to picks instead of the Jews doing geography.
All right, let's do that. That's probably good for everyone. All right, first fight of the evening, featherweight division. Pepe Castro against Andre Touchy-Feely. See, playing off the nickname. I will go with Andre Feely. He's training with the folks there in Sacramento at Alpha Male. I think his wrestling and or striking is going to be better than Pepe, who I think sometimes throws technique out the window. So give me the American.
Have we confirmed that it's actually Andre Touchy-Feely and not like Touche? Is that possible? It is Touchy?
Pretty sure it ends in a Y. Touche ends in a E.
Ah, darn it, grammar. You got me again.
You missed that day in French class.
I'll go with Feely as well.
I think it was also with your Miss Geography class. It might have been the same. You missed those two class. You showed up a little late that day, and then your next class was math or something. I don't know. All right, let's.
Point.
Huh?
My math is on point.
Right. That's what I'm saying. You attended the math class. All right, let's get to the lightweight division. Gilbert Burns against Oliveira here, making his UFC debut. That's Alex Oliveira. I got to go with the guy who's actually fought in the UFC, Dave. Undefeated in his career, 2-0 so far, so give me Mr. Gilbert Dorito Burns there.
Yep, I'll take Dorito.
All right, Tony Martin against Leandro Santos, lightweight division. Oh, man, I think this is a close fight, but I'll go with Santos here. I think that his victory over Escudero was a pretty good one, and I think Martin might have a hard time trying to combat Santos, so I'll take the Brazilian in this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with. Wait, did you skip a fight? Oh no, the women are next, right?
We'll get to that one next.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my list that I have written down. I had it.
As long as we pick them all, it doesn't really matter, right?
I gotcha. You did Santos, Martin. I'm taking Santos all the way.
All right, let's go Shayna Baszler against Amanda Nunes. Definitely Amanda Nunes. I haven't been very impressed with Shayna Baszler in quite some time, so I'll go with the Brazilian once again.
Yeah, I'm going to take Amanda Nunes early in the fight, TKO.
Co-main event, Josh Koscheck against Eric Silva. As I said in the last fight, I think it's time for Koscheck to retire. I don't think he has anything left in the tank, so I'll make it 3 for 4 here on Brazilians. So give me Eric Silva.
I'm gonna take Koscheck in this.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, it'd be 3 of 5 because I think Burns is American, right?
Sounds like it.
Anyway, so 3 of 5 on Brazilians with Eric Silva. Anyways, you're taking Silva as well?
No, I'm taking Koscheck because I'm trying to get ahead of you in picks.
Okay. All right, to the main event.
I didn't miss strategery class.
Oh yes, I think you were in the same class with George Bush, right? You strategery.
Oh.
See what I did there? All right, let's.
Women's
main event of the evening. Damian Maia against Ryan LaFlare. Despite all I said, Dave, layoff, not having fought a guy to Damian Maia's caliber, 25 minutes, not doing all those things. I'm going with the American Ryan LaFlare. Despite all I said, I think that he will be able to keep it standing, and he will be able to outstrike Damian Maia, maybe get a knockout, not a quick one, but maybe later as the fight progresses, as I think Maia's going to have a tough time dealing with LaFlare's wrestling credentials and his size here at 170. I could be wrong, but I'm liking LaFlare in this one.
I'm going to take Maia to Fitch LaFlare.
All right. Any other final thoughts here before we end this week's show, Dave?
You know, how much time do we have? I have a question that's been on my mind. It has nothing to do with this past week, but to make you think, Jim, and maybe we could get some feedback on our Facebook page. Can I throw it out there?
Do it.
Okay. So I was contemplating on Friday when I was at work. No, Saturday before the fights started. Let me go through here. Are title changes good for the UFC and for MMA in general? And when I say MMA, maybe we could get our friend Nick from A&N on. Maybe we could get AJ to weigh in on this. Are title changes a good thing from a business perspective, from a building stars perspective? Because it's been a long time since we've had a new champion. But then I kind of scrapped the idea for writing the article because we got two new titles, in one night. But does AJ see an uptick with Joanna? Because clearly he doesn't have Joanna stuff on the website. But now, does he have to reduce the price of Pettis? How does a title changing affect business? Would the UFC rather have unbeatable champions? It's just something I've been kind of mulling over for a while.
I think that having a new champion is never a bad thing, regardless of how they go about it, because there might be new intrigue in following this champion and seeing what they could do. Now, in the case of Dos Anjos and Joanna, I think Joanna is poised to be more of a fan favorite because of her skills, and I think the women's division is kind of on the rise, especially the 115 being new and exciting. I think she's being from Europe, I think she has a little more potential for star power than Rafael Dos Anjos.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not to say Rafael Dos Anjos can't go on to be a champion for another couple years or can't be a fan favorite. I'm just saying the way, like I said, the long rise, and he hasn't been the most flashiest guy to get to the title picture. Maybe he right away he's not as intriguing as Joanna is, just looking at recent developments. But like I said, the fact that his next fight will be against someone he either previously lost to or someone he previously beat, I think makes him intriguing. And if he can get past either of those hurdles, I think then can get him on the right path to really being like a fan favorite. And for Joanna, with the whole European thing, the Polish thing, I kind of brought up possible main event, Overeem JDS. Last time I checked, Chicago has more former families from Poland than any other city and or community in the United States. So wouldn't it be perfect to put a champion from Poland as the main event in Chicago?
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, she has the potential to really go. And I'm also saying this as a person, a proud Polish heritage person as myself. So, she's going to be great for the sport from that angle. I think just the way, there's a lot of Irish fans, like in Boston, we talked about, Boston being like a second home for Conor McGregor. Maybe Chicago, there's a lot of Polish families like mine here in the Detroit area. Well, Joanna can really, be a star here in America as well. And I think just kind of looking at the next couple, she has that possible potential. And you can just look at I think the show really helped, I think, show the talent of the 115 division. I think a lot of people were intrigued. You look at, Calderwood with her Scottish background, just similar situation. Both Joannes, putting their country on their back, so to speak. Carla can come back. A lot of people are intrigued by Paige Van Zandt in that division. I think there's a lot of star power in that division's, really getting noticed, and I think has the potential to be on the rise. And then, like I said, for Dos Anjos, I think that next fight will either, help him, or if he loses his title, I think that will endure a new champion. Especially, like I said, a lot of people are starting to like the Cowboy, and that's a really easy guy to root for if he ends up finally becoming champion.
Yeah. What do you think? It's just stuff that I've been mulling over for a while, and since we had a short show, I figured I'd throw it out there. So, is it good is it good if Dos Anjos loses and Cowboy becomes the champ? I mean, because think about, like, Aldo's been the 145-pound champ since its inception, right?
Yes.
I mean, and in between two of his fights, we could have 3 lightweight champions. Like, I mean, that you think that's okay? That's fine for business? I mean,
I think it's fine because Pettis, despite only have one title defense, I think was a really marketable guy, and I think will continue to be a really marketable guy. Like I said, if Dos Anjos can beat Nurmagomedov or Cowboy, I think he can start to become a marketable guy. And I think Cerrone has already proven he's a pretty marketable guy, and if he becomes champion, that's just going to only double his already exposure and fame and marketability, because I think a lot of people are, like I said, like his attitude, like the way he fights 5 times a year. So I think that's only good for the UFC. And I think for Nurmagomedov, Russia has started to flood in a lot of fighters in there, and that could be the possibility of moving to Russia, kind of expand more into Europe. So there's a lot of possibilities there, even with Nurmagomedov, and I think a lot of people have been talking about him in circles, and he's a very intriguing guy as well. He comes out with that weird wig, he's a guy that can kind of, I think, be marketable as well. So looking as forward is you gotta look for something you kind of hang your head on, and it may take guys longer to become marketable. Like I think Jose Aldo maybe now is starting to get marketable. His first couple maybe not so much, but it's just a thing in the guy's personality. I think Anderson Silva, it took him a while to be marketable. Because for a while there he beat Rich Franklin. Even to this day is probably still one of the most popular UFC fighters. I mean, we talked about when he fought Kung Lee. That was his first fight not on pay-per-view since he beat Ken Shamrock at the Ultimate Fighter 1 finale.
Right.
So, him beating Rich Franklin twice was a huge change in the guard. Rich Franklin was definitely one of the UFC's most popular fighters at that time. American guy, he was the school teacher that traded in, teaching science for the science of hitting people in the face. You know what I mean? He had a very intriguing story, and then all of a sudden Anderson Silva became a huge star. And for a guy that still to this day is not a very, loud and talking a lot, he's a very humble guy. And, things have changed a little bit now, but, it took him a while for Anderson Silva to become a truly marketable star. And I think same thing with GSP, because he's a humble, guy, hard worker. It took him a while. And you could probably say, to me, beating BJ Penn, then beating Thiago Alves at 100 is, to me, what truly made GSP kind of a superstar. I think that those 2 fights put him on another level. So it may not be immediate, but if a champion can kind of sit there and work at it, and he's champion long enough, I think people start to realize that this guy is pretty good, and maybe we should get behind him.
Well, maybe we can get some of our people who are in the business, like AJ, like Nick. I would just, it's curious because, if, just for an example, if Betch Correia fights Ronda next and knocks Ronda out, I don't think that either one of those 2 gentlemen lose any money on the Ronda stuff that they have at their respective businesses because of how big of a superstar she is. But, I don't know. My mind wanders when I'm at work. I get bored. So I just think of these things that if all the champions change this year, I mean, is that good? Is that bad? Is that good for AJ? Is that bad for AJ? Just things that I think about. But thanks for listening to my deep thoughts by Dave Sadler.
What was that old skit on SNL? It was Deep Thoughts by Jack Candy?
Yeah.
Oh, that was great. That was some good stuff. And he had opened that huge book.
Yeah.
It's like to the first good stuff. All right. Well, what was that?
Anthony Pettis drops from number 5 on the pound-for-pound list to number 10. Dos Anjos goes from not ranked on the top 15 pound-for-pound to number 9. Those are the credible folks that you have voting on the rankings on UFC.com.
That's one of the reasons why we don't actually do a pound-for-pound. It's just so hard to really look at it and go, well, this guy it's...
So Vitor didn't fight and hasn't fought, but now he dropped 2 spots to 15.
Yeah, I don't know. That's one of the pound for pounds. I think nice to kind of discuss, but to actually have a dedicated ranking by a media poll dedicated to it, I think is rather ridiculous because it doesn't mean anything.
Well, here's my thought. Currently, it says right now it's Jones, Aldo, Mighty Mouse, Weidman, and Velasquez are your top 5. I think that's where it should stop.
Yeah, and even the last two, both of them haven't fought. I mean, obviously Velasquez way longer than Weidman, but both have not fought. And by the time their next fights come, Velasquez is over a year, and by the time Weidman does fight Vitor, it'll be about a year.
But I mean, let's be real. Top 5 in mixed martial arts right now.
That's what I mean. If you take that kind of stuff out, it's hard to argue that it's not those 5 guys.
Yeah, and just cut your list right there. Do you really care that Anderson Silva is 11 and Renan Barão is 12?
Yeah. All right.
Let that sink in.
All right. He is the Juice Dave Sadler. You can follow him in more deep thoughts there at Vigilante Juice on Twitter. I'm your host, Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. So before we go, we'll thank our friends at MMAinsider.net, MMAforlife.ca. Of course, as we said, AJ Hiller, MMAsignatures.com. We'll throw them out there. How about you mentioned Nick Brower there at ANN Sportscards.com, and of course our presenting sponsor of Fight Chicks. So for the Juice, I am Jim Gramm, and thanks for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks.